Good deal. Well, thank you guys for giving me a little time this morning. I hope I can bring you guys some value all about radon and how it relates to the real estate transaction. It's depending on how many questions there are and stuff, but it's probably about a 30-40 minute presentation. But obviously, if you want to ask questions or something, and I'll make it as interesting as possible. I'm no Bill Gallagher, but I do try to make it a little bit interesting. So first, let's start off with radon. What is radon? Radon is a gas, and it's caused by the breakdown of uranium in the earth. And places that have more rocky soil, like the mountains up around the Dakotas, and there's going to be a map on here, obviously have higher levels of radon than areas more in the coast. There's less rock formation and uranium down in the earth there, but high levels of radon have been found in every county in North Carolina. So, don't just think just because you're in Transylvania County, which is up there in the corner, that you won't have high radon. And there's only one way to tell, and that's to test. And actually, I'll go ahead and leap into this. I don't know if you can see.
If it's in front of you, I
Yeah.
can see it.
There's two types of tests that you have for radon. This is a continuous monitor test. Sorry, I got my virtual background on. Trying to get it in front of me. I'm like, oh, I'm fading into the. But this is a continuous monitor test. This is, you're going to have to hire a radon professional to come out and do this. This usually costs between $100 to $200. And then you have the charcoal test that you can buy at Lowe's or Home Depot, and they're usually around $15 or less. And you got to send them off. You just did it.
$10 to $12 for shipping.
Yeah. Yep.
And $15.
100%. Yeah. And now you might say, well, Preston, obviously, what's the difference? Obviously the cost advantage goes to this. Are they accurate? Well, I'll tell you, this is a passive test, and this is a passive aggressive. No, this is an active continuous monitor test. And what this thing does is it takes a reading every hour, and it will also let you know if there's a tamper with it. You need to do the test for at least 48 hours, usually 48 to 72. Is a good, but at least 48. So this is going to take, a test every single hour and average them, and it'll show you all the results. This is just going to give you one measurement over the entire time, which, the end result's kind of the same because that's what you're looking for here. It just gives you a little more detail. Here's the thing though, if you are doing a real estate transaction, I would highly recommend the continuous monitor because nobody can fudge the test on a continuous monitor. If they leave that door open or they move it, it'll show up as a tamper. And then you're going to have to retest. Whereas with the passive test, they could set it outside, they could move it, they could leave the doors open, and you would never know. So my recommendation is if you're just testing your own home and you just want to find out, these are fine. These are great. I mean, you're not going to fudge your own test. Why would you even spend the money if you're not, you're trying to find out. But if you want to test your own house, I'd recommend these. But if you have a real estate transaction where you got multiple parties involved that might be incentivized to fudge the test, use a continuous monitor because that's going to give you a much more accurate and it's going to protect you in any kind of liability situation. So continuous monitor, if it's a real estate transaction, and you can do one. Real estate agents ask me all the time if I'll test their house, and I'm like, well, I can, but honestly, if you just use the charcoal test, it'll be cheaper and whatnot. So anyway, let's move along. So how does it affect us? Where does it come from? Well, we talked about radon is the decay of uranium. It affects indoor air quality worldwide. There's radon everywhere. I mean, there's radon, outside, it's in the mountains, whatever. But, when you're outside, it disperses. But when you're inside a house, what happens is it comes up through the basement, the crawl space, or the expansion cracks on a slab, and it gets somewhat trapped inside the home. And it's almost like, if you think about, we try to make our house energy efficient, tight, that sort of thing. The problem with that is you're making it so tight, if radon gas gets up in there, it can't disperse. And that's a little bit of a problem when you're in areas with high radon. So, and then you compound the fact, if you look at this picture, if you think about this, in the wintertime, especially, your house is warm, right? And warm air rises. So it actually acts as a vacuum to pull, because the cooler air is low. So if you look at that picture, you got this is a basement, you got expansion cracks down here in the corner. And when I say expansion cracks, what I mean is basically, if you've ever been in a garage and you go up to the edge, you've got a slab, and then there's a little bit of a gap, usually felt in there, and then the wall. And they have to have that gap because that concrete expands and contracts with different temperatures. Well, but that concrete slab's like 4 inches, and then it's just dirt underneath. So that's pulling up radon, that sort of thing. So that's where it comes from. And especially if your house is heated in the wintertime, which most livable houses are, it's called the stack effect. And that actually creates a little bit of a suction. So yeah, here you go. You can see, so the warm air rises, just like warm air in a balloon. If you think about warm air in a balloon, that air will rise. And then it actually is going to pull in more air from radon gas in the soil. Now, so what is radon? How does it affect us? Over 21,000 deaths per year of lung cancer they attribute to radon. And that's more than drunk driving. Drunk driving is approximately 17,400. Falls in the home are 8,000. Drownings, 3,900. Home fires, 2,800. So if you think about that, you don't hear a whole lot about radon deaths. You hear a lot about home fires, drownings, drunk driving. But honestly, there's more lung cancer related deaths to radon than any of those. So it is a big deal. It's definitely not something to take lightly. And if you look at it, it's the third leading cause of cancer deaths. Number one is leukemia at 21,800. Number two is lymphoma, 21,500. But the radon lung cancer comes in at 21,000. And after that, you see some of the other types of cancer: liver, esophagus, ovary, and on down, larynx, bone joint. But it's the third, as far as cancers go, it's the third leading cancer cause of deaths. Let's see, let's go to the next slide. 3 variables influence the risk of radon-induced lung cancer. And I promise you, I know I'm reading from the thing right now, but we were just talking about, don't be a boring instructor that just reads from the thing. And here I am. Oh, wow, I sound like Charlie Brown's teacher. I promise I'll ad lib, but there are some parts that I will read. 3 variables that influence the risk of radon-induced lung cancer: the level of radon, obviously, that the person's exposed to, the length of time the person's exposed to that level, whether or not the person is never a smoker or an ever smoker. And I'll show you that. So smoking is the leading cause of lung cancer. Radon is the second leading cause. But if you combine those two, it's really bad. We inspected a house down in South Carolina, near the James K. Polk thing, if you're familiar with that. Near Lancaster. And we did a radon test on this house, and it had high radon. Well, we knew going in, it would have been a family house, had been in the family for a while, and 3 different family members had died of lung cancer. So we tested it for radon, and it had 18 picocuries per liter. Yeah. So it's for real. So, and when I say 3 different people died, it was over like a 20-year period, but they had never tested for radon, and it was just in a high radon area. So it's real. It's not just something, hypothetical that we're talking about. But if you look at this chart, if you look up the top, this is based on 1,000 people who've never smoked, and these are the different levels. So, and this is over a lifetime. So if it's 20 picocuries per liter, 36 people out of 1,000 are going to get lung cancer. If it's 10 picocuries, which that's high, we all know that the EPA recommended, if you remember from real estate schools, 4. If it's 10, about 18 people out of 1,000 are going to get lung cancer and on down. But let's go to 4, which is where the EPA says you should do a radon mitigation system. So about 7 people out of 1,000 would get lung cancer. And obviously, if you go down to like 0.4 or lower, it's not even point, out of 1,000. It's very low, very low. And yours was 0.7. So
yes.
you're pretty good. You're just slightly above 0.4 there. Now, this is for people who have never smoked. Now, look at this chart. If you've smoked, if you added, if you've smoked and you were exposed to 20 picocuries, 260 people out of 1,000 get lung cancer. That's over a fourth. I mean, that's crazy numbers. And you know what's even crazier? In the United States, it's 4.0, but there's places in Europe where the level is 10 or 15 before they say, it needs to have some radon mitigation. But again, we go down to 4 because that's, if you go down to 4, that's the thing. And if you remember, what was it on the other one? If it was 4, if you've never been a smoker, 7 people. And if you've been a smoker here for 62 people. So that's quite a, so if anything you can take away from that, don't smoke and get your house tested for radon, test your house for radon. But obviously it goes up dramatically if you have high radon and smoke. All right, so where is radon? Radon's all over. There's actually if you go to ncradon.org, they'll send you a test for $7 and they encourage you to use theirs and send it in, and they track all of their test results. So it does give a little bit of a sample. I live in 28277, and that's Charlotte, kind of right there on the South Carolina line. And this was out of 563 self-tested recording. 15.1 was the highest level among the houses. I'm not sure if they had the average, but that's obviously high. But you can check, it'll, if you look this up, it'll show your county, and that basically they've tracked all the tests over time. We talked about the 2 different types of tests, the canisters and the continuous monitors. Again, continuous monitor if you're doing a real estate transaction, and if you're just doing your own house, these kits are fine. You get these at Lowe's or Home Depot. How much did you pay?
Roughly $15.
Okay.
And then shipping was between $10 and $12. And that's for 2 to 3 day shipping.
Okay.
Like
so you're all in for like $25 ish. Well, still a lot cheaper than the,
You know what? Peace of mind.
Yeah, $200, this test. And the reason this, by the way, the reason this costs so much, I mean, the equipment itself is like $1,500. And then the inspector is going to have to come out there twice. They're going to have to set it and then come back out and get it. And we have to send these things in every year to get calibrated. And that's $300 or $400. It's pretty expensive. So the maintenance on those things, that's why it costs so much. It's not like those inspectors are ripping us off. No, there's a lot of cost involved with it. Yeah, this is the continuous monitor. Again, most home inspectors, it's between $100 to $200. Results are immediate. That's all. I forgot to say, that's a great thing in a real estate transaction too, is as soon as they come out after those 48 hours, they hook it up to a printer. I mean, it prints out the results, where, there you've got to wait 10 days. Or a week
and a half. Yeah, you're right.
So if you are like, you got due diligence money on the line and all that, you want to know the answers immediately. Now, when I say get a certified radon professional out to test, you want to make sure they have so this is kind of a caveat here. North Carolina does not require radon testers to be licensed. They do require them to be for home inspection and for pest control. There is no like state required certification. There are, however, 3 different organizations that certify people. And you know what I'll do? I'll follow up and send that to everybody.
Okay.
But you want them to be certified by at least one of those organizations. They're all pretty good. They're national organizations that have, standards of practice and that sort of thing. But, you don't just want somebody that's doesn't have some type of training, because there's a lot of training when you set up the test, like where you put it, how high, where in the house, you want to make sure that, there's a little bit to it. You got to know what you're doing. And there's a website at ncradon.org where you can check to see if the person has that certification or a certification. Like I said, there's 3 different organizations and they're all good. So there's Chip, he's our manager. He's on there, so you can check to see. So understanding the test results. As you probably remember from real estate school, the threshold is 4 picocuries per liter. That's the point where the EPA recommends that you have a radon mitigation system. So how does that break down? Pico means 1 trillion. Curies was named after the French woman who discovered it, Marie Curie. So what is a picocurie? It's the rate of the decaying process that can cause cellular damage to the lung tissue that can lead to lung cancer. So what's happening is this radon is in this uranium and it's being released. And as it's breaking down, energy is released. And if it gets into your lungs, that energy causes damage to your tissues and makes it susceptible to cancer. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So it's radioactive. I mean, literally. So that's what it's measuring. It's kind of a level of radioactivity. So let's say you have high radon, above 4.0, and it's really interesting too when the test comes back 3.8 or 3.9. Of course, what's this buyer going to want? Yeah, no matter where you make the threshold, think about it. If you're close to that threshold, the buyer's going to want a mitigation system. Here's the good news: mitigation systems don't actually cost. They're not as expensive as you would think. Most mitigation on a 2,000 square foot house or less, and I'm saying that because that only requires one fan, is probably going to be $1,500 to $2,000. Okay. Now, if you get above 2,000 square feet, you might have to have 2, just depending on. I mean, there's a lot of variables that go into it. But let's talk about that for a second. So let's say you have high radon. This is a picture of a radon system. And what you've got, if you look at the base of it, this is 4-inch pipe, same pipe that's used for waste lines, like toilets and things like that. But obviously, no water's going in this. So what's happening is it's usually they drill into the ground, into the slab at some point, and they seal up all those expansion cracks. And then there's a fan. You see where it's like swollen right there? That's where the fan is. And then that fan runs. So it's pulling up any radon gas and then taking it above the roof line and dispersing it. And they're very effective. I mean, we've tested for high radon, going back and test. The highest one I ever had was like 16 point something picocuries, and it was at Lake Norman. It was right on the lake, and I'll talk about that in just a second. And they did a mitigation system, and we went back, and it was like 0.5, 0.6 or something after that. So it did work. It did work very well. If you see here on the thing, it's usually between $1,500 to $2,500. They're far less expensive if they're installed while the house is being built. Now, I know that a lot of people are like, you might get some buyers or sellers, or buyers, not sellers. Well, if I'd known it had high radon, I'd never bought the house. Or I've heard that about termites. And I'm like, well, you do live in the South. And, there's 2 types of houses in the South, those that got termites and those that just ain't found them yet. Everything can be mitigated. I mean, everything can be fixed. And the ironic thing about this is I've taught classes up in Asheville, and we do inspections up in Asheville. If you get a class in Asheville and say, how many of you guys ever had experience with radon or mitigation system? 90% of the people, because it's a lot more common up there. I would say over half the houses have a mitigation system. I have 2 friends that have mountain houses, and they both have mitigation. It's just part of, that's what you do. And I want to tell you a little ironic story about that too. There's more radon, uranium in the ground in rocky areas, mountains up in the Dakotas. I'll show you a map in a minute. All right, so if you go back to the end of the 1890s, the early 1900s, tuberculosis. When people got tuberculosis, which is obviously a lung ailment, the doctors back at that time, the prevailing thought was that clean mountain air would be good for you. They actually have tuberculosis clinics or in the mountains. Yeah. And if you've ever been downtown Asheville or downtown Boone, a lot of the taller buildings have these big, it looks like fire escapes, but the idea was that the clean mountain air would be good for you. Ironically, they're sending people with tuberculosis to areas with higher levels of radon. It's kind of backwards of the way it should be. Now, obviously, the clean mountain air, if you're out in the open, is fine. But inside the buildings in the mountains, unless you have a radon mitigation system, which I don't think there were any at the turn of the century, you're actually sending them to a place that would not be good for tuberculosis. Anyway, sorry, I digressed a little bit. You're probably like, well, go back to just reading the thing now. We got stuff to do. This is just a breakdown of how the mitigation system works. It's actually quite simple. It's just a suction tube. So the fan is right here is what creates the suction. That's, the swollen part is where the fan is. So like I said, they're going to run the pipe underneath the slab somehow, or in the crawl space if it's a crawl space. And if you think about it, a basement and a slab are the same thing. It's just that it's further down. It's already in the soil. So they're going to drill a hole at some point. This is actually a crawl space setup here. If it was a slab setup, it would come through the top of the slab. But they're going in. Oh, well, no, I'm sorry. This is a basement. And it's going down to the slab here, and you can see. And they're going to put gravel at the mouth of that so it doesn't get clogged up with dirt or anything. The gravel will keep that from happening. And basically, you're pulling any radon gas that would originate from this area up through here and out. Same thing here, any that's inside the crawl space, and go outside of the house so that it doesn't go inside the house. And if you recall, the stack effect without this makes the radon want to go inside the house. So we're just bypassing the radon. Now, I want you to look on this picture right here. See this tube? It's called a U-tube. YouTube. I didn't know that pun was coming, but all right. So this is what that is. This is something, if you have a radon mitigation system or you ever show a house that has a radon mitigation, somewhere on that tube, on the pipe should be this tube. And what you want is on the left, displacement. And what that's doing is telling you the fan's running and there's suction. And if the fan's not working, they're going to level out. And what that is, they just put liquid in there and they put some type of coloring, food coloring or something, just so you can see it a little better. Sometimes it's blue, sometimes it's red. Color doesn't matter. But what you want is that on the left. So if you have a house that has high radon, radon mitigation system, I recommend at least once a month going to look at this and make sure this is displaced. If it's ever level, then that fan has stopped running. Thus, your suction has stopped. Usually pretty easy to fix. And again, that little fan doesn't take much energy. People ask me, well, how much it costs to run that fan? It's probably $1 or $2 a month. It's not bad. It's just almost like if you think of like a little fan that you would hook up to your phone or something, to keep yourself cool. That's about the amount of energy it takes. So it's not a ton, and it does run continuously. So there's also some funding out there for people, if they can't afford, if they can't afford a radon mitigation system or to have testing. If you go to ncradon.org, you can find out a little more about that. But it's kind of like smoke detectors. If people can't afford smoke detectors, you can get that. Every house should have smoke detectors and CO detectors if they have any gas burning appliance or a garage. And they should always be, hallways and sleeping areas and near the gas appliance. But radon, I recommend it obviously for every house. I get that I'm a little biased. Here's some common questions I get. Does a basement house have more than a non-basement house? And my answer to that is that's not what's causing the radon. It's what's in the ground. So, if you had two houses over the exact same radon thing, yes, the basement would have slightly more, but because it's closer. But you give me a crawl space over uranium in a basement, somewhere that doesn't have uranium, that crawl space is going to be a lot higher. So the basement's not what's causing the high radon. It does have a slightly, it's going to be slightly higher in a basement if there are, but it's the uranium that's in the ground. And there's no way to tell, and we've been in this market, we've been doing inspections here since the mid-90s. And people ask me, well, I do know a couple of areas, but there's no way to tell. There's pockets here and there. I will say this, and I want to be careful when I say this because I don't want you to think all lake homes have radon, but radon comes up from the earth, right? You have a certain amount just coming up through water tends to plug it up and cause it, and that actually can make your radon levels higher too. If you're testing for radon and you have like 3 or 4 days of rain, what happens is it plugs all the pores in the ground around. So now the place that's porous is underneath your house. So it's actually more concentrated. That makes sense. So sometimes if you think about the earth, radon's coming up through the earth and you have Lake Wylie, Lake Norman, Mountain Island Lake, it plugs up a pretty big body of water there. So that radon's really not getting through where the lake is. So it comes out around the edges a little more concentrated. Now, am I saying all lakefront homes have radon? No, I'm not. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Make sure that that's on there. But if I tested 10 lakefront homes and 10 other homes in the middle of Kannapolis, would I bet money that if I had to bet money, if there was one that had radon, I would bet money on the one that was a lake house. But again, there's no way to know without testing. And there's an area in Weddington, actually close to my house, that is known to have high radon, and there's no rocks of any kind that I know of. It's not like they're slipped, but we've tested several in this one area, and for whatever reason, they're high there. Another thing that can happen, and I'm not saying anything that isn't public knowledge. There's some condos in downtown Charlotte where it's not coming from the ground where it normally comes from. What happened was that when they mix the concrete, how they have to use aggregate, they pulled in some uranium with that aggregate. And one of them that's public knowledge, Latta, I think it's Latta Pavilion. It's that one in Dilworth, right in the middle of Dilworth. It's like a city block almost, Starbucks is close and all that. And then there was another one, I think it was Park Road and right near South Park Road and Fairview, I think, one of those condos. And they tested high. Now, you can look them up. The one in Latta Pavilion, they had a radon mitigation system put in. Now, obviously, it cost them a lot more than, the 1,500, because these are all these condos. I think it was like 1.3 million or something. I could be off on that, but you can look it up. Every time we get an inspection there, because it's known that it had high radon, they always get a radon test. All of ours that we've done since they did that have come back low. Usually like I have to go back and look, but less than 1.0. So it did work. But there are some condos that are known to have high radon. So just be aware of those. If you're in real estate, sooner or later, you might show one of those condos. Have you shown one?
No, I have a question.
Sure.
The water concentrates it, so wouldn't it be like 10 times worse if it's a condo on the beach?
Good question. I like well, the only thing is the condos, it was actually, instead of coming down from the ground, though, it was actually kind of like emanating from the walls or the concrete that they poured. But if you had a 1-story condo or you're on the bottom unit, you could be correct. You could absolutely be correct. So yes, get those tested. Now, but the only other caveat with that, though, is the beach, the coastal areas are usually a little bit lower in radon because there's not as much rock. Our coast. Now, obviously, if you went to like Maine or somewhere like that, they have a lot higher concentration. On that ncradon.org, there's actually a map too of, the EPA has a map. Obviously, all the mountainous areas are higher. There's some pockets in North Carolina that are high. If you go up to the Dakotas, if you ever sell a house in North or South Dakota, get a radon test. That's all I'm going to say. Or any of those Canadian territories,
What about apartments?
If they're the newer apartments, there's a chance they could have gotten it. Well, anything that's built on the ground floor, has a chance, just like a house. But as far as the concrete edge of it, you could get those. They could have pulled it in with an aggregate. So I recommend getting tested on all of them for sure. I know I'm a little biased, but
So if you live in an area where there were volcanoes at some point, even though they're not active or whatever. So there's volcanic rock and all that other stuff. Is that an area where you would consider it could possibly be?
That's a
Right.
great question. I'm not sure if uranium is in volcanic rock, but if you look at the map of high levels up around Washington, and you got Mount St. Helens and all that. That is a great question. You know what? I will research that and find out for you. I'm not sure volcanic rock, I wonder like Hawaii or something, but I do know the areas of like Washington and Montana and all that, they have high levels of radon. And, there's what is it, that Pacific ring of volcanoes that go all the way around to Hawaii and stuff. So I wonder if that's causing that. Yeah, I'm not, I'll find out. I'll find out for you. Well, does anybody have any questions out in Zoom land? Maria, Melissa?
So if an inspector on the coast, if you're buying a property like on the coast on one of the wherever, one of the beaches, Carolina Beach, Oak Island, anywhere
Right.
in there, and the inspector says, no, you don't need to get a radon test, we don't have it out here.
They don't have as high percentages of it, but like I
Should
said,
not be telling you.
yeah, it's been found above 4.0 in every county in North Carolina,
Mhm.
including that county, which is what, New Hanover, I guess. I would never tell somebody not to test it. And in fact, I would recommend it. And I would probably, I don't know if there's some sort of thing you can sign. It's like, hey, I'm suggesting you do get it tested. I mean, I would hate to have been the realtor for that house down in Lancaster.
Yeah.
And said, don't get tested,
Yeah.
I being a real estate agent in general too, I would never box, I may be getting above my pay grade here, but I would never box myself into, I would always present them with, statistics and let them make their own decision, but I'm not telling you to. And in fact, there's certain things you may want to get them to sign off of.
Yeah.
That I recommended that they do this, but they decided not to. And I know, and obviously I'm biased about this, but there's a couple of lawsuits going now where supposedly the real estate agent, during the time of high due diligence, waiving the home inspection. And there's a couple people who've moved in and had problems. And now they're blaming the real estate agent, saying the real estate agent told me not to get an inspection. And I don't know if that's true or not, because, sometimes people say things that may or may not be true. I don't know if they just present it, but I certainly wouldn't tell them not to get any test. I would say, you can get any test you want.
Yeah.
We can get any kind of test you want, because you don't want that to come back later on and be an issue. But anyway, did that answer the question?
Yeah.
And I'm biased. I'm in the business of doing testing, so but I think I would say that even if I wasn't.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It just was interesting that a home inspector would be advising them not to bother with the radon.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
Even on the coast, say your chances are less, but somebody wins the
Yeah.
lottery at some point.
Right. I get that he's probably feels like he's probably doing them a favor, because there's probably a 99% chance it's not high. But if you sell 100 houses in your lifetime, one person is
Yeah.
going to have high radon, and for $150,
Yeah.
I would take that peace of mind all day long. I don't want to
Oh, absolutely.
lay in bed at night. Am I the one out of the 100 that,
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about your high school, I was even thinking about that with that level there. And, whenever I look at statistics, I always think about my high school. So my high school had 1,600 people, some high schools have 3,000. So I'm like, so that means a certain number of people in my high school have had this disease or something. It puts it in perspective that's a real number. I mean,
Yeah.
that it's not like somebody never gets it. If it's 1 out of 2,000 or 1 out of 100, you probably know somebody.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, thank you guys for having me. I hope that was beneficial. Check out our website, homeinspectioncarolina.com. There's a lot more information on radon there, and a lot of other free downloads, seller's inspection checklist, things like that are really good if you're having a listing that's going to have an inspection. It's kind of like a study guide to go over for what's going to be on the inspection. It's a free download. You guys, you have my permission to put your logo on it if you so choose. It's up to you. We also have a measurement sheet. And we also call this the keep the buyer's dad busy sheet during the inspection. You can print this thing off and give it to the buyer's dad and give him a tape measure. And
Let's go have some fun.
yeah, exactly. Well, thank you guys for having me.
Good. Thank you, Preston. We appreciate it as always.
Thank you.
As always. Any questions?
I have a question though. Preston, the mitigation system, is it a one-time installation? Do you have maintenance period that you have to do?
On the radon mitigation system. That's a great question. Usually the only thing that happens is the motor burns out on them. I would, so here's what you want to do. If you have a radon mitigation system, obviously it probably had high radon at one point. You want to test once a year for sure. You want to keep checking that, the little YouTube thing. And I would keep the number of the person who installed it or the contact information and have them check it like once every 5 years or so, just to make sure, whenever you have something moving, that can wear out, lubrication, things like that. But in those little electric motors and those things are not, the installation's what cost a lot, the little motor. And obviously you want their number. If that tube ever just, gets level, you would want to be able to call them, and get it changed right away. And short-term radon exposure, I mean, obviously nobody wants to go into a house where it's 20 or something, but, we've all been exposed to high radon. It's, for short periods of time, and we probably just don't know it, but it's the prolonged exposure that really, really is what causes problems. Hope that answered that question.
Yes, thank you. And the drawing that you show about the fan and the level that we should look for, where typically in the house do you find that? Where do they put that?
Can you tell me what? I didn't catch all of it.
Grab the remote.
The remote, okay.
Hang on, Sabine.
Okay.
I caught part of it. I couldn't quite hear all of it.
Okay, our volume was down too low. Can you repeat that, Sabine?
Sorry.
Yes, the fan, the drawing that you show about the fan and the level that we have to look for, like the left picture that you show, typically,
where it's
where
uneven,
do
yeah.
yes, yeah. Typically, where do you find that in a house? Where do they
Oh,
put it?
Okay, so wherever they installed it, they usually try to put it eye level. So if it's like in the basement, it's probably going to be up about 4.5 feet or so. They're usually pretty easy to find. Now, if you're on a crawl space, it might be a little bit different. But that is a great question, because if you show a house that has a radon mitigation system, one thing you want to find out about it, who installed it. You want to find out where that place is. You also want to calm your buyer down. They probably like, oh my gosh, it's kind of red. Remind them that if they bought a house in Asheville,
Right.
they would more than likely have one of these. I mean, but you want to, if you're buying a house that has one, find out all that information. Where is that tube? And who installed this thing? So that you do have, and maybe you want to, contact them and say, hey, you installed this. Does it have any kind of warranty? Some of them have a warranty, that sort of thing. How much would it cost for maintenance? You're just doing right by your buyer by, having that knowledge. But yeah, that's a great question. Usually if you're showing a house and it's in a basement or something, well, even if it's in a crawl space, sometimes it'll come up through the wall, and they usually put it eye level. So just look for that white pipe, and somewhere on there's going to be a tube.
So whoever installs these radon mitigation systems, do they have to have any kind of special certification or anything like that?
Great
I know
question.
I know you said with this, they don't really, right? So, but what about installing the system?
Same. They don't have to, but they should. And fortunately, I do think about 99% of them do, because that's how they learn how to do it.
Right.
And it's not like 2-year degree or anything. It's like a 2-day class.
Okay.
But it does teach them a lot about it. But yes, great question. If you have anybody install it, make sure they have at least a certification from one of those 3 organizations.
Okay.
And I'll send that to you on email.
Okay.
It's like a lot of initials.
Right, I'm sure, I'm sure.
There's 3 different organizations, but they're all good and they're all officially recognized in North
Okay.
Carolina.
That's good to know, because I think we just assume, as we should not. You know what that does.
Yeah, remember the
but
Bad
we-
News Bears?
Yeah.
The way he diagrammed it. You're probably looking at us like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
So the Bad News Bears was his baseball team way back, and Walter Matthau was the coach. And he did this famous scene where he's like, he was kind of a drunkard, and his team was low down. They were sort of like they went from 0 to hero. But anyway, there's a scene where he diagrams assume. Don't assume anything, and he broke it down. And if you think about how assume is spelled, don't make out of you or me. He conjugated it, I guess, and it was like, here's what happens when you assume. You make up out of you or me, and
Oh my gosh,
there's
that's
some
funny.
truth in that.
Yeah, and so I think that when people are gonna use these, professionals are gonna use.
It's my favorite thing.
Like I said, yeah. Did you know the scene I'm talking about, right? Oh, you never seen it? You got to watch the Bad News Bears. It was the original one.
Original one.
Yeah, he's like talking to his kid, the team that's all like down and out.
All
you
of
know.
misfit kids.
Yeah, they're all like the kids nobody else wanted on anybody else's team.
Kind of like the little giants.
Yeah, same thing. And Walter Matthau, I think he was like the coach that nobody
My
wanted either
husband-
because he's like an alcoholic.
I believe him for Howling. He can talk just like Walter Matthau.
Oh, really? Yeah, and he's like smoking during the practice. I mean, like everything that you shouldn't do. But it's a classic scene. He has like a chalkboard and he's like, all right, don't assume. Here's what happens when you assume. And he wrote assume and he conjugated, broke it apart. The ASSU me. It's like, dude. And I was like, that's kind of true. Yeah.
Yeah. So we will not assume.
Yeah. Don't assume. And that's a good thing in real estate. Don't assume
No,
anything.
never assume.
Shouldn't.
Yeah. Check but verify. Or what is it? Trust but verify.
Yeah.
That's the Russian thing. Yeah.
Yep.
People will say anything, but they're like, you don't believe me? And I'm like, I believe you, but I'm gonna verify.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So,
Awesome.
well,
Well, thank you
that was
guys for having me.
fantastic, Preston. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate it as always.
And just if you have any questions, my website, homeinspectioncarolina.com, you can contact me through there and I'll send you those organizations.
Okay,
All right. Well, thank you.
perfect. Thank you,
Thank you.
guys.
Thanks. And thank you for coming. You're like me.